The sun was gradually descending toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. After a long journey, we had finally reached the island and felt the tension begin to melt away. This vacation promised to be different. My dad wasn't joining us. He had to stay behind for work, and while some might consider that a drawback, for me, it was quite the opposite, a sense of relief. I wouldn't have to endure his endless critiques, bothersome remarks, and strict supervision. At last, a taste of freedom, albeit not entirely. We were staying with my mum and sister, and initially the idea seemed somewhat intriguing. My sister Monica had just celebrated her 25th birthday, and decided that this trip would be more than just a vacation for her, it would be a complete break from her usual life. She had always been bold, vibrant, and occasionally rebellious, with long dark hair, sun-kissed skin, and a daring gaze that often captivated everyone around her. My mum, despite recently turning 48, didn't lag behind in embracing a modern lifestyle. She looked at least 20 years younger, and sometimes, even I forgot she was my mother and not a close friend. We settled into a charming house overlooking the ocean, surrounded by lush palm trees and a vibrant garden. The house had 3 large bedrooms, allowing each of us to pick a room that suited our preferences. Once we unpacked and dealt with a few minor issues, we decided to take a quick nap to recover from the long journey. By evening, we gathered in the kitchen to discuss our plans. Monica had a mischievous glint in her eyes and a knowing smile that hinted she was already concocting something. "You know," she began with a playful smirk, "since we're here on this beautiful island, and far from everything familiar, why not let ourselves relax a little? Dad's not here, and no one knows us." Mum raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. In fact, she seemed open to the idea of breaking free from her routine and enjoying a bit of freedom herself. "You're right, Monica," she said with a warm smile. "Dad doesn't know what we're up to. Maybe that's what makes this a true vacation." We all laughed, and I felt a unique atmosphere settling around us, a sense of trust and freedom, as though, for this short time, we were just fellow travelers, escaping our usual roles. Mum soon gathered us by the pool. I dove in first, instantly feeling the cool water wash over me, easing every remaining trace of tension. Mum joined me, and shortly after, Monica appeared on the terrace, casually wrapped in a towel. For a moment, we all froze as she stood there, the setting sun casting her silhouette in a striking way. She was wearing a tiny swimsuit that left little to the imagination, her figure framed by the golden light. "Are you serious about spending the vacation like this?" Mum asked, her tone more amused than reproachful. Monica simply shrugged with a confident smile. "We had a deal, Mum," she said, her voice teasing. "No one's here to tell me what to do, remember? Isn't that what we agreed on?" Mum didn't argue, and instead let the moment unfold naturally. We enjoyed the evening together, immersed in a magical feeling of freedom and the unknown, as if we had temporarily stepped away from all societal conventions. As night fell and the island was bathed in starlight, we retreated to our rooms after hours of fun by the pool. Sleep didn't come easily for me, though. Lying in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, I found myself reflecting on how liberating it felt to be away from my dad's overbearing presence. Why did I even need his constant supervision and relentless questions? The farther I got from his influence, the more I realized this trip might allow me to see my family in a whole new light. Suddenly I heard footsteps in the hallway, followed by a gentle knock on my door. Startled, I opened it slightly to see Mum standing there, her expression a mix of concern and warmth. "Sorry to wake you," she said softly, sitting down beside me. "I just wanted to check how you're doing here." "Better than I expected," I replied, grateful for her effort to make this trip so special. "Thanks for organizing everything." Her gaze lingered on me in the dim light, and for a moment the silence between us felt profound, almost heavy. She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, squeezing lightly, and my heartbeat quickened. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes I feel the need to step away from everything familiar, just to be myself." That evening seemed to mark an unspoken shift, a delicate boundary between our usual family dynamics and something more mature and understanding. Mum stayed beside me for a while, her presence comforting in the stillness, until she lightly squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's going to be okay, Billy. We're going to have an amazing vacation." At dawn, we took our time getting ready, chatting and teasing each other as we prepared for what the day would bring. I could feel the lightness in the air, as though the waves we hadn't yet seen were already lapping at our spirits. Without Dad, this trip felt more carefree. There were no rules to follow, no strict schedules or criticisms. just the freedom to let go a little. Mum was her usual calm self, while Monica seemed to be coming into her own, spreading her wings. We arrived at the beach early, choosing a spot near the water, before the sun's heat could scorch the sand. Spreading out our towels, we settled in, ready to embrace the day ahead. The moment my sister stepped onto the beach, her outfit immediately drew attention. A short, sun-faded top, an almost sheer cover-up, and tiny shorts. I noticed how heads turned, both men and women, casting glances her way. Some looked impressed, others envious. She carried herself with a confidence that radiated power, as though she was fully aware of the effect she had on those around her. If our father had been there to witness the way she captivated the beachgoers, he would have undoubtedly ordered her to cover up. But today it was just the three of us, and no stern lecture could reach her. I watched from a distance as she strolled along the shoreline, parting the crowd with her presence. While Mum opted to lounge under the sun, my sister decided to take a swim, and I followed her into the water. At first the sea felt shockingly cold, almost like a challenge to endure, but as the waves lapped over my shoulders, the chill gave way to a serene sense of bliss. My sister splashed about, her laughter echoing as she seemed to absorb the vitality of the moment. At one point she turned to me, shaking her damp hair out of her face with a playful chuckle. "Billy, why don't you show me how to swim like a pro?" she teased, her eyes sparkling mischievously. We began racing each other to the buoys, our laughter filling the air. At one point she lingered underwater longer than usual, and when she surfaced, her expression had darkened slightly, a shadow passing over her features. "Did you lose something?" I asked, wading closer to her. She murmured, her voice tinged with worry. "A necklace Mum gave me." Her tone carried more than just frustration. It was clear the piece of jewelry held sentimental value. We dove repeatedly, searching the sandy bottom, but our efforts were in vain. When it became clear the necklace was gone, she sighed heavily, masking her disappointment with a stoic expression, as if unwilling to show vulnerability. Back on the shore, Mum was waiting for us, smiling as she watched our antics in the water. Noticing our dejected expressions, she raised an eyebrow. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Before I could respond, my sister answered briskly, "Everything's fine, Mum, just got a bit wet." Her tone was light, but I could see her glancing back at the ocean, her gaze reflecting a quiet sense of loss. Moments later she brushed it off, slipping off her shorts and reclining on the towel in her swimsuit, sunglasses shielding her eyes, as if to close herself off from the world. Mum sat beside me, noticing my distracted expression. With a playful smile she handed me a bottle of sunscreen. "Billy, can you help me with this? If not, I'll end up sunburned," she said warmly. I carefully applied the lotion to her shoulders and back, trying to work quickly to avoid drawing attention. My sister noticed and smirked. "Billy, maybe you should take a bath in sunscreen instead, otherwise you'll be the one with sunburns tonight," she teased. Her words made me flush with embarrassment, a strange mixture of unease and self-consciousness washing over me. The beach, the sunlight and this unfamiliar closeness among us, it all felt oddly intimate. Her teasing, though light-hearted, carried a tone that felt almost too personal. Watching her continue to attract the gazes of strangers, I realized this trip had shifted into something different, something deeper than just a vacation. Later that afternoon, as the sun's intensity began to fade, we returned home. A warm haze still lingered in the air, a reminder of the summer heat. The rest of the evening seemed uneventful, yet a subtle tension hung in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of energy I couldn't quite place. Mum had already taken her bath, leaving her towels behind as she went to prepare dinner. I headed to my room, hoping to unwind and clear my head. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened, and I heard footsteps behind me. Turning to look, I saw Monica standing there, fresh from her shower. For a moment time seemed to slow. Her damp hair clung to her shoulders, framing her sun-kissed skin, which glistened faintly from the moisture. The towel wrapped around her body seemed precarious, as though it might slip at any moment. I froze, unable to look away, and before I could stop myself I whispered, "You look beautiful." She smirked faintly, her gaze steady and unflinching, as though testing me. There was something in her expression that sent a chill down my spine. Slowly she stepped closer, and almost without thinking I moved toward her. We were so near that I could feel her breath against my skin. Tentatively, I placed a hand on her shoulder, and for an instant, the room felt suspended in an invisible heavy silence. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around her in a hug, tighter than I'd ever held her before. Her heartbeat seemed to echo in sync with mine as I whispered in her ear, "I can't resist you." In that fleeting moment the world seemed to disappear. It was just the two of us, suspended in the now. But just as quickly, a wave of realization crashed over me. A sharp, undeniable sense that this was wrong, too strange. Pulling away abruptly, I avoided her gaze and bolted from the room, my heart racing as if I'd just run a marathon. Reaching my own space, I leaned against the door, struggling to catch my breath. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of feelings, confusion, guilt, and something I couldn't quite name. Images and emotions blurred together, creating an endless loop of inner turmoil that left me unable to think clearly. I wanted nothing more than to erase the memory of that moment, yet at the same time, I was desperate to hold on to it. I rushed into my room, slamming the door behind me, and was immediately engulfed by an oppressive silence. It felt suffocating, wrapping around me as my thoughts raced uncontrollably. My mind was on fire, and my chest felt as though a heavy knot had been tied there. I struggled to gather my thoughts, but they slipped through my grasp like grains of sand, leaving me overwhelmed with far too many unanswered questions. How did this even happen? I kept asking myself, but every attempt to find an answer was drowned in the waves of anxiety that refused to let up. Each time the memory replayed itself, my heart pounded harder, and guilt settled deeper within me. I felt as though I had betrayed everything I thought I stood for, every principle I had taught myself. Yet the more I dwelled on her gaze, her subtle sigh, the more I felt myself losing control. Her access to these sorrow failed to hide. Under the weight of all of my feelings, the depth of my grief had overwhelmed me. In frustration, I ran my hands through my hair and forced myself to get up, pacing the room in a futile attempt to burn away the turmoil that was eating at me from within. But no matter how hard I tried, thoughts of her crept back into my mind, relentless and inescapable. I told myself over and over that it needed to stop, that it had to be left behind. Yet, inside, the storm continued to rage. "No, this is wrong," I muttered under my breath, repeating it as though the words could bring clarity or calm. Just then the door swung open with a loud bang, snapping me out of my spiraling thoughts. I turned to see my mother standing there, her face a mix of shock and concern. She froze, staring at me with a penetrating gaze that seemed to search for answers to the chaos she must have sensed within me. "What's wrong, son? Why are you shouting like that?" she asked softly, though the worry in her voice was unmistakable. I wanted to respond, to explain everything, but the words caught in my throat. There was no way to articulate what I was feeling. This was my personal turmoil, something no one else could understand. I looked away, unable to meet her eyes, terrified that she might see through me and uncover the truth. After a tense moment she left the room, and I collapsed onto the bed, utterly drained and unable to think clearly. I felt as though the world around me had dissolved into a confusing maze of emotions and mysteries that I couldn't begin to navigate. Everything felt unsteady, and I was completely lost. Meanwhile, Monica seemed to grow more self-assured, as though nothing had changed for her. On the contrary, it felt as though she was reaching out to me more often, her looks and gestures carrying a newfound intensity. Her glances lingered longer, her smiles became more frequent, and it was clear she wanted to maintain and deepen the connection that had formed between us. But I knew this couldn't continue. Things had already gone too far, and if we didn't stop, the consequences could be devastating. I made every effort to keep my distance, avoiding her whenever she initiated conversations or found excuses to be near me. When she got too close, I walked away. But each time I saw her, the same conflicting emotions roared back to life within me. The struggle in my heart and mind felt endless, tearing me apart from the inside. I understood that I needed to step back, to restore things to the way they had been before. But no matter how much I tried, the internal battle continued to haunt me. It was an unrelenting storm, and I was trapped in its grip, unable to find peace.